Chapter 2, Section 2, Subsection 2, The Child in Egypt. When we turn to Egypt, we find remarkable evidence of the same thing there also. Justin, as we have already seen, says that Ninus subdued all nations as far as Libya, and consequently Egypt. The statement of Diodorus Siculus is to the same effect, Egypt being one of the countries that, according to him, Ninus brought into subjection to himself. In exact accordance with these historical statements, we find that the name of the third person in the primeval triad of Egypt was Khons. But Khons in Egyptian comes from a word that signifies to chase. Therefore, the name of Khons, the son of Maut, the goddess mother, who was adorned in such a way as to identify her with Rhea, the great goddess mother of Chaldea, properly signifies the huntsman, or god of the chase. The distinguishing decoration of Maut was the vulture headdress. Now the name of Rhea in one of its meanings signifies a vulture. As Khons stands in the very same relation to the Egyptian Maut as Ninus does to Rhea, how does this title of the huntsman identify the Egyptian god with Nimrod? Now this very name Khons, brought into contact with the Roman mythology, not only explains the meaning of a name in the pantheon there that hitherto has stood greatly in need of explanation, but causes that name, when explained, to reflect light back again on this Egyptian divinity, and to strengthen the conclusion already arrived at. The name to which I refer is the name of the Latin god Consus, who was in one aspect identified with Neptune, but who was also regarded as the god of hidden counsels, or the concealer of secrets, who was looked up to as the patron of horsemanship, and was said to have produced the horse. Who could be the god of hidden counsels or the concealer of secrets but Saturn, the god of the mysteries, and whose name, as used at Rome, signified the hidden one? The father of Khons, or Ohonzo as he was also called, that is Amun, was, as we are told by Plutarch, known as the hidden god, and as father and son in the same triad have ordinarily a correspondence of character, this shows that Khons also must have been known in the very same character of Saturn, the hidden one. If the Latin Consus then thus exactly agreed with the Egyptian Khons as the god of mysteries or hidden counsels, can there be any doubt that Khons, the huntsman, also agreed with the same Roman divinity as the supposed producer of the horse? Who so likely to get the credit of producing the horse as the great huntsman of Babel, who no doubt enlisted it in the toils of the chase, and by this means must have been signally aided in his conflicts with the wild beasts of the forest? In this connection, let the reader call to mind that fabulous creature, that centaur, half man, half horse, that figures so much in the mythology of Greece. That imaginary creation, as is generally admitted, was intended to commemorate the man who first taught the art of horsemanship. In illustration of the principle that led to the making of the image of the centaurs, the following passage may be given from Prescott's Mexico as showing the feelings of the Mexicans on first seeing a man on horseback. He, Cortes, ordered his men, who were cavalry, to direct their lances at the faces of their opponents, who, terrified at the monstrous apparition, for they supposed the rider and the horse, which they had never before seen, to be one and the same, were seized with a panic. But that creation was not the offspring of Greek fancy. Here, as in many other things, the Greeks have only borrowed from an earlier source. The Centaurus is found on coins struck in Babylon, showing that the idea must have originally come from that quarter. The Centaur is found in the zodiac, the antiquity of which goes up to a high period, and which had its origin in Babylon. The Centaurus was represented, as we are expressly assured by Berosus, the Babylonian historian, in the Temple of Babylon, and his language would seem to show that so also it had been in primeval times. The Greeks did themselves admit this antiquity and derivation of the Centaurus, for though Ixion was commonly represented as the father of the Centaur, yet they also acknowledged that the primitive Centaurus was the same as Kronos, or Saturn, the father of the gods. Compare Scholiast in Lysophron, Bryant. The Scholiast says that Chiron was the son of Centaurus, that is, Kronos. If anyone objects that, as Chiron is said to have lived in the time of the Trojan War, this shows that his father Kronos could not be the father of gods and men. Xenophon answers by saying that Kronos was the brother of Jupiter, in his book De Venatione. But we have seen that Kronos was the first king of Babylon, or Nimrod. Consequently, the first centaur was the same. Now the way in which the centaur was represented on the Babylonian coins and in the zodiac, viewed in this light, is very striking. The centaurus was the same as the sign Sagittarius or the archer. If the founder of Babylon's glory was the mighty hunter, whose name even in the days of Moses was a proverb, Genesis 10:9, wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod the mighty hunter before the Lord. When we find the archer with his bow and arrow in the symbol of the supreme Babylonian divinity, and the archer among the signs of the zodiac that originated in Babylon, I think we may safely conclude that this man-horse or horseman archer primarily referred to him, and was intended to perpetuate the memory at once of his famous huntsman and skill as horsebreaker. Now when we thus compare the Egyptian Cons, the huntsman, with the Latin Consus, the god of horse races, who produced the horse, and the centaur of Babylon, to whom was attributed the honor of being the author of horsemanship, while we see how all the lines converge in Babylon, it will be very clear, I think, whence the primitive Egyptian god Cons has been derived. Cons, the son of the great goddess mother, seems to have been generally represented as a full-grown god. The Babylonian divinity was also represented very frequently in Egypt in the very same way as in the land of his nativity, i.e. as a child in his mother's arms. One of the symbols with which Cons was represented shows that even he was identified with the child god. For, says Wilkinson, at the side of his head fell the plaited lock of Harpocrates, or childhood. This was the way in which Osiris, the son, the husband of his mother, was often exhibited, and what we learn of this god, equally as in the case of Cons, shows that in his original he was none other than Nimrod. It is admitted that the secret system of Freemasonry was originally founded on the mysteries of the Egyptian Isis, the goddess mother or wife of Osiris. But what could have led to the union of a Masonic body with these mysteries had they not had particular reference to architecture, and had the god who was worshipped in them not been celebrated for this success in perfecting the arts of fortification and building? Now if such were the case, considering the relation in which, as we have already seen, Egypt stood to Babylon, who would naturally be looked up to there as the great patron of the Masonic art? The strong presumption is that Nimrod must have been the man. He was the first that gained fame in this way. As the child of the Babylonian goddess mother, he was worshipped, as we have seen, in the character of Ala-Mahozim, the god of fortifications. Osiris, in like manner, the child of the Egyptian Madonna, was equally celebrated as the strong chief of the buildings. This strong chief of the buildings was originally worshipped in Egypt, with every physical characteristic of Nimrod. I have already noticed the fact that Nimrod, as the son of Cush, was a Negro. Now there was a tradition in Egypt recording to Plutarch that Osiris was black, which in a land where the general complexion was dusky must have implied something more than ordinary in its darkness. Plutarch also states that Horus, the son of Osiris, was of a fair complexion, and it was in this way for the most part that Osiris was represented. But we have unequivocal evidence that Osiris, the son and husband of the great goddess Queen of Egypt, was also represented as a veritable Negro. In Wilkinson may be found a representation of him with the unmistakable features of the genuine Cushite or Negro. Bunsen would have it that this is a mere random importation from some of the barbaric tribes, but the dress in which this Negro god is arrayed tells a different tale. That dress directly connects him with Nimrod. This Negro-featured Osiris is clothed from head to foot in a spotted dress, the upper part being a leopard skin, the under part also being spotted to correspond with it. Now the name Nimrod signifies the subduer of the leopard. Nimrod, from Nimel, a leopard, Namel in Hebrew, and Rada or Rad, to subdue. Red means to go down in Hebrew, Laredet, to go down. According to invariable custom in Hebrew, when two consonants come together as the two rs in Nimrod, one of them is sunk. Thus, Nineveh, the habitation of Ninos, becomes Nineveh. The name Nimrod is commonly derived from Mered, to rebel, but a difficulty has always been found in regard to this derivation, as that would make the name Nimrod properly passive, not the rebel, but he who was rebelled against. There is no doubt that Nimrod was a rebel, and that his rebellion was celebrated in ancient myths, but his name in that character was not Nimrod, but Merodach, or as among the Romans, Mars, the rebel, or among the Oscans of Italy, Mamers, smith, the causer of rebellion. That the Roman Mars was really in his original the Babylonian god is evident from the name given to the goddess, who was recognized sometimes as his sister and sometimes as his wife. Bellona, which in Chaldee signifies the lamenter of Bel, from Bel and Ona, to lament. The Egyptian Isis, the sister and wife of Osiris, is in like manner represented, as we have seen, as lamenting her brother Osiris. I want to add here, as a Hebrew scholar, not scholar, but someone who learned Hebrew for 3 years now, Nimrod literally means we will rebel. That is first person plural future tense, word for word. This name seems to imply that as Nimrod had gained fame by subduing the horse and so making use of it in the chase, so his fame as a huntsman rested mainly on this, that he found out the art of making the leopard aid him in hunting the other wild beasts. A particular kind of tame leopard is used in India at this day for hunting, and of Bagajet I, the Mughal emperor of India, it is recorded that in his hunting establishment he had not only hounds of various breeds, but leopards also, whose collars were set with jewels. Upon the words of the prophet Habakkuk 1 verse 8, swifter than leopards, Kitto has the following remarks. The swiftness of the leopard is proverbial in all countries where it is found. This, conjoined with its other qualities, suggested the idea in the East of partially training it, that it might be employed in hunting. Leopards are now rarely kept for hunting in Western Asia, unless by kings and governors, but they are more common in the eastern parts of Asia. Orosius relates that one was sent by the King of Portugal to the Pope, which excited great astonishment by the way in which it overtook, and the facility with which it killed deer and wild boars. Le Bruyne mentions a leopard kept by the Pasha who governed Gaza and the other territories of the ancient Philistines, and which he frequently employed in hunting jackals. But it is in India that the cheetah or hunting leopard is most frequently employed, and is seen in the perfection of his power. This custom of taming the leopard and pressing it into the service of man in this way is traced up to the earliest times of primitive antiquity. In the works of Sir William Jones we find it stated from the Persian legends that Hoshang, the father of Tammuz, who built Babylon, was the first who bred dogs and leopards for hunting. As Tammuz, who built Babylon, could be none other than Nimrod, this legend only attributes to his father what at his name imports he got the fame of doing himself. Now as the classic god bearing the lion skin is recognized by that sign as Hercules, the slayer of the Nemean lion, so in like manner the god clothed in a leopard skin would naturally be marked out as Nimrod, the leopard subduer. That this leopard skin, as appertaining to the Egyptian god, was no occasional thing, we have clearest evidence. Wilkinson tells us that on all high occasions when the Egyptian high priest was called to officiate, it was indispensable that he should do so wearing, as his robe of office, the leopard skin. As it is a universal principle in all idolatries that the high priest wears the insignia of the god he serves, this indicates the importance which the spotted skin must have had attached to it as a symbol of the god himself. The ordinary way in which the favorite Egyptian divinity Osiris was mystically represented was under the form of a young bull or calf, the calf Apis, from which the golden calf of the Israelites was borrowed. There was a reason why that calf should not commonly appear in the appropriate symbols of the god he represented, for that calf represented the divinity in the character of Saturn, the hidden one, Apis being only another name for Saturn. The name of Apis in Egyptian is Hapi or Hapi, which is evidently from the Chaldee hap, to cover. In Egyptian, hap signifies to conceal, bunzen. The cow of Atol, however, the female divinity corresponding to Apis, is well known as the spotted cow, Wilkinson. And it is singular that the Druids of Britain also worshipped a spotted cow, Davies's Druids. Rare though it be, however, to find an instance of the deified calf or young bull represented with the spots, there is evidence still in existence that even it was sometimes so represented. When we find that Osiris, the great god of Egypt under different forms, was thus arrayed in a leopard's skin or spotted dress, and that the leopard skin dress was so indispensable a part of the sacred robes of his high priest, we may be sure that there was a deep meaning in such a costume. And what could that meaning be but just to identify Osiris with the Babylonian god who was celebrated as the leopard tamer, and who was worshipped even as he was as Ninus, the child in his mother's arms. Note, meaning of the name Centaurus. The ordinary classical derivation of this name gives little satisfaction, for even though it could be derived from words that signify bull killer, and the derivation itself is but lame, such a meaning casts no light at all on the history of the centaur. Take it as a Chaldee word, and it will be seen at once that the whole history of the primitive Centaurus entirely agrees with the history of Nimrod, with whom we have already identified him. Centaurus is evidently derived from Cain, a priest, and Tor, to go round. Cain Tor, therefore, is priest of the revolver, that is, of the sun, which to appearance makes a daily revolution round the earth. The name for a priest, as written, is just KHN, and the vowel is applied according to the different dialects of those who pronounce it, so as to make it either Kon, Khan, or Cain. Tor, the revolver, as applied to the sun, is evidently just another name for the Greek Zen or Zan applied to Jupiter, as identified with the sun, which signifies the encircler or encompasser. The very word from which comes our own word sun, which in Anglo-Saxon was Sunnah, and of which we find distinct traces in Egypt in the term SNNU, as applied to the sun's orbit. The Hebrew zon or zavon, to encircle, from which these words come, in Chaldee becomes don or davon, and thus we penetrate the meaning of the name given by the Boeotians to the mighty hunter Orion. That name was Kandaon, as appears from the following words of the scholiast on Lysophron, quoted in Bryant. Orion, whom the Boeotians call also Kandaon. Kandaon, then, and Cain Tor were just different names for the same office, the one meaning priest of the encircler, the other priest of the revolver, titles evidently equivalent to that of Baal Khan, or the priest of Baal, or the sun, which there can be no doubt was the distinguishing title of Nimrod. As the title of Centaurus thus exactly agrees with the known position of Nimrod, so the history of the father of the Centaurs does the same. We have seen already that though Ixion was by the Greeks made the father of that mythical race, even they themselves admitted that the Centaurs had a much higher origin, and consequently that Ixion, which seems to be a Grecian name, had taken the place of an earlier name according to that propensity particularly noticed by Salverti, which has often led mankind to apply to personages known in one time and one country myths which they have borrowed from another country and an earlier epoch. That this only be admitted to be the case here, that only the name of Ixion be removed, and it will be seen that all that is said of the father of the Centaur, or horsemen archers, applies exactly to Nimrod, as represented by the different myths that refer to the first progenitor of these Centaurs. First then, Centaurus is represented as having been taken up to heaven, that is, and having been highly exalted through special favor of heaven. Then in that state of exaltation he is said to have fallen in love with Nephili, who passed under the name of Juno, the Queen of Heaven. The story here is intentionally confused to mystify the vulgar, and the order of events seems changed, which can easily be accounted for. As Nephili in Greek signifies a cloud, so the offspring of Centaurus are said to have been produced by a cloud. But Nephili, in the language of the country where the fable was originally framed, signified a fallen woman, and it is from that fallen woman, therefore, that the Centaurs are really said to have sprung. Now the story of Nimrod as Ninus is that he fell in love with Semiramis when she was another man's wife, and took her for his own wife, whereby she became doubly fallen as a woman, and fallen from the primitive faith in which she must have been brought up. And it is well known that this fallen woman was, under the name of Juno, or the dove, after her death worshipped among the Babylonians. Nephili was used even in Greece as the name of a woman, the degraded wife of Atamas being so called. Nephilim in Hebrew, Nephilim, are the fallen ones, the watchers, the fallen angels. And Aninophel means I fall, so same word basically. Centaurus, for his presumption and pride, was smitten with lightning by the supreme god and cast down to hell. Ixion. This then is just another version of the story of Phaeton, Aesculapius and Orpheus, who were all smitten in like manner and for a similar cause. In the infernal world the father of the Centaur is represented as tied by serpents to a wheel which perpetually revolves, and thus makes his punishment eternal. In the serpents there is evidently reference to one of the two emblems of the fire worship of Nimrod. If he introduced the worship of the serpent, as I have endeavored to show, there was poetical justice in making the serpent an instrument of his punishment. then the revolving wheel very clearly points to the name Centaurus itself, as denoting the priest of the revolving sun. To the worship of the sun in the character of the revolver there was a very distinct allusion not only in the circle which, among the pagans, was the emblem of the sun god, and the blazing wheel with which he was so frequently represented, but in the circular dances of the Bacchanalia. Hence the phrase Bassaridum rotator evan, the wheeling heaven of the Bacchantes. Hence also the circular dances of the Druids, as referred to in the following quotation from the Druidic song: "Ruddy was the sea beach, whilst the circular revelation was performed by the attendants and the white bands in graceful extravagance." That this circular dance among the pagan idolaters really had reference to the circuit of the sun, we find from the distinct statement of Lucian in his treatise on dancing, where, speaking of the circular dance of the ancient Eastern nations, he says, "With express reference to the sun god, it consisted in a dance imitating this god." We see then here a very specific reason for the circular dance of the Bacchae, and for the ever-revolving wheel of the great Centaurus in the infernal regions.